All right. Welcome to the BenShearGolf Podcast. I mean, what an honor for me specifically today to have a true icon in my world joining me. There are very few people, if anyone, who's done what this man has done in his past. He has won championships in the NFL, the NBA. He's been a strength coach in the MLB. This guy has done it all. He was the pioneer that has paved the way for the lucky few like myself who have tried to at least somewhat follow in his footsteps and do a halfway decent job. And for him to come on and give me some time today is truly appreciated. Al Vermeil, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate that.
So Al, we obviously, I know you're a huge golf fan. I mean, you actually would call even into my radio show on Sirius XM and talk and share. You obviously have a passion for golf, which makes this conversation more interesting. Obviously, you're experienced through all sports, but now kind of being a passionate guy involved with golf as well, I think makes this a really relevant conversation for people, you know, in today's world with golf fitness becoming such a big piece of the game. So I know that you play a lot of golf yourself. How many days a week you currently playing some golf?
Well, I try to get out there and play a couple of days a week. I practice. I've got a net in the basement. I sneak out at night. You know, I'm probably the most frustrated golfer of all time because I've taken lessons from, well, Chuck Cook's a personal good friend of mine, Mike Malaska. I went down and took a lesson from the great Bob Toski in November, Johnny Elliott, Eddie Ofield out of Chicago. Oh, God. And I took a bunch of lessons when I used to live in Sacramento when I was young, and I'm sure I'm forgetting. Oh, Jim Flick. I took a lot from Jim, who was late Jim Flick was great. And I'm taking lessons now from a gentleman named Andrew Horner. I just, you know, I'm always searching, and not for the Holy Grail. I'm just searching, you know, to play better. And many of the instructors said, you can't shoot X with that swing. I said, no. They said it must be in your head. Yeah, well. And Cook would agree. And then I took a good friend of mine who introduced me through Chuck, and Mike Malaska introduced me to a gentleman named Dick Drager. I'm taking lessons from Dick, and he's a Toski disciple, and he's a great guy. So I know all these people, and unfortunately, most of them go into the witness protection, along with Greg Rose. Because I always want to go out there and get Greg to get a lesson from Greg, but Greg's very smart. Well, you know, I got this schedule, I got that scheduled, you know.
Always too busy, yeah.
I don't blame him.
Yeah, I've actually had Chuck on the show. I'm good friends with Chuck myself, and he's obviously one of the great teachers of all time. So sounds like you're in pretty good hands. And, you know, look, you've done a lot in your life and you've accomplished a lot. So, you know, most of us are just happy to get a conversation with you and share some of your wisdom. So, and more importantly, how does your brother feel to be the second most famous Vermeil?
Oh, no, he's the most famous Vermeil. In fact, most places, I'll tell you a cute story. In 1992, we'd won at least one on the verge of a second championship somewhere in that year. He comes, we used to belong, my son and I belonged to the Richmond Hunting Club, which was north of where I lived. And we went to dinner that night, Dick and his wife, Carol, Diane, and I, to the Chicago Chop House, a famous place. I walk in. The guy doesn't recognize me. He said, "Hey, Coach, how you doing? You know, I'm from Philadelphia. What a great coach you are." And I'm standing there. So I'm not the most famous. One other time, a guy, I gave him my name. He said, "Oh, you know, a guy I thought he was going to start a conversation." He said, "Vermeil, you related to Dick?" I'm like, "Yeah." Okay. He walked away.
You're like, "Hey, I'm pretty important too, you know."
No.
People love their football, that's for sure. And your brother, it's a pretty successful family.
Well, that's where I cut my teeth on strength and conditioning. It was all in football, and you know, but you know, like I tell, just you talk about. I don't know if this is pearls of wisdom, but I always tell coaches, when you look at team sports, don't get caught up on, well, I train a football player this way or I train a basketball. I said, don't get caught up on that. It's because it's not the difference in the ball or the stadium they play in. It's what you're trying to accomplish. Yeah. In other words, you know, don't get, the uniform's different, or I'm playing baseball, I've got a different instrument than a golf club. And, you know, it's so I think I said, what are you trying to accomplish, man? And in team sports, It's amazing to me, Ben. I'm going to ramble here a little bit and stop me.
That's what you're on for.
It's amazing now everybody's a speed expert. Oh God, well, it's interesting. I said when I started coaching football, if you couldn't run, you couldn't play. When I played up until I went to college, we played both ways. They just changed the rule my first year at Utah State. But my point being, we always sprinted. What they call floating sprints, we used to do ins and outs. And then when I was at Moreau High School, I got a hold of a fellow graduate assistant, had been at Kansas State with me, Gib Romaine. He was at Maryland, and Frank Costello was doing the downhill running. So we implemented that. And of course, John Chu was up on the hill, so we implemented plyometrics. But if there's no difference in a baseball player running fast to first base than a football player running fast, except the football player's got to change track. But I broke down my methodologies. If you want to run fast for this period of zone, that zone, it's about movement. Team sports about movement. Now, golf is a little different, but it's interesting watching what's going on in golf. I think Greg and Dave have done a great job. Chuck Cook and I started doing this back I just left the 49ers in '83, and people thought we were nuts. That was crazy, throwing the medicine ball and stuff like that. But I think people get too caught up in sports specificity. And I'm no golfer, but I can imagine a PGA Tour player. He goes to the range. He works on specific things. The swing is, but the most specific is competition. And everything changes when they're under that kind of pressure. You watch it at the tournament this weekend. And I tell people in team sports, practice is fairly specific, but different in golf. When you're doing a practice round in golf, that's the course. When you're practicing a team sport, if you're a starter, you're not practicing against the same difficulty that you're going to see in game, because now you're going to be playing against another starter. Where when you practice in golf, the course, if you went out and practiced last Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday at Olympic Fields, that's the same basic course you're going to see. So it's that same, that I kind of think of the same competitor.
Yeah, but what's interesting about golf is that so much of people of their time practicing is spent on the range, which is totally different. It's a perfect lie. You're actually not on the course.
You get to hit it over and over.
Yeah,
in team sports, and it's in golf. Now you got the pressure of winning and losing, and you're on national television, so the stress level goes up.
A lot of time to think in golf. A lot of time walking to the ball.
And that's always been my problem. I go and I'm if I hit a good shot, fine. If I hit one bad, okay, now I got to do this, got to do that. But I just think that keep it simple. The things that worked 30 years ago work today. I was just talking to a young man from Ireland. I said, the great Babe Ruth, the great Jesse Owens, the great Johnny Unitas, the great Jack Nicklaus, they were all born with the same parts. We're all born with the same parts today, and there's nothing wrong with innovation, but we got to be careful. We're not constantly reinventing the wheel and giving it a new name, because until we start to do something which I don't agree with genetically to change human beings, they're all born with the same parts, not the same abilities, obviously, but I just think you just got to be very smart, and you have to adapt. You look at a Bubba Watson. What would I do with him? He's a tall, slender guy. He's not going to, don't normally support loads. You be very careful with what you do with him, opposed to build something more with a different body type. And the other thing is, don't screw them up.
Oh yeah.
The great ones, and I've been, one of the greatest athletes I ever worked with was Horace Graham. And people say, oh, what a tremendous job. I said, it was simple to do with. Well, what do you mean? He had great reactivity. His limbs were proportioned. He had a great work ethic. He had that great, like I said, nervous system. he hadn't been exposed to weight training, strength like squats and pulls, or Olympic lifting. So he had the nervous system. So all you did is basically give him more cubic inches,
Right.
which you would do in a car, or today they use the different liters. He's going to be able to apply more force in a shorter period of time, and that's the secret. What you want, if the faster you can apply force, and it's force efficiency. How long does it take you to apply force? Well, if the faster you run, you have shorter ground contact times, but you're applying a great amount of force, and then you get a lesser athlete. That's the one that's the challenge. If they don't have, and especially, and you know this, Ben, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You get a golfer, let's say in his 30s, who wants to improve club head speed, and you're going, you kind of really passed that window a long time ago, partner. I don't want to tell you that. But you get someone in their 20s who wasn't extremely explosive, maybe a little below average. The time where you're going to get much improvement with him was much, or her, at a younger age. It's difficult.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I here's the other thing I always say. You never see, including myself, people that get recognized for what they did without having great athletes.
Oh,
and I always tell this people, I said, if I've been with the New Jersey Nets or whatever they call themselves and the Detroit Lions, no one would know who I am.
Hey, easy. I'm a Nets fan there, buddy. Relax.
Okay. Sorry about that. But I said,
Exactly.
The program I ran at Moreau High School was the same, the basic program I ran all the time, or at Casa Robley High School. So you have to be careful when you look at people. You have to know who they work with, and then look at some of the other athletes they work with, because as Angel Spasoff, when he first came to this country, stayed with me. And he said, your job is really not for this. I was working with Horace and Scotty. He said, it's really for the average athlete. He said, the guy. So if you can help someone that's average reach closer to the genetic potential, you're not going to put anything. I mean, you're not going to put it. I mean, Tiger Woods was born to be great. Jack Nicklaus was born. Now, they had great coaching, and I still think they would have been successful just watching other, because they had it.
Yeah, look, it's like the FedEx commercial. They're born to do this, right? And I always have that argument, this nature versus nurture argument. And I'm like, look, nurture is what allows you to optimize you, but nature is what allows certain people to be world class. You're not going to take the average person, and if you give them the world's greatest strength coaches, the world's greatest technical coaches, mental coach, you get all of that, whatever the greatest of everything you could get is nutrition, sleep, do all the stuff. And you take the average guy, he can't be world class. It doesn't matter. You can't nurture it. I don't care about 10,000 hours, 500,000 hours. No. I don't care what you do. People are born to be great. Just like they're born to be musicians or good at mathematics or whatever the case may be. You need that raw talent, period, that gift from God to be that type of special.
You're absolutely right. I mean, we're not all born to be Einstein. You have that. And if you look at the PGA Tour, you look at the top probably 15 or even 10 or 20, there's a pretty consistent pattern, but you'll see guys falling in and out of that top 30. Then they're out of the top 70. Then you don't hear them. A guy will win a couple tournaments, and he's still, as Hank Haney said, what do they call him? The new sliced bread. Right. And then all of a sudden the new sliced bread is, and his instructor gets all this, look at, he's worked with this guy. So everybody goes and buys his videotape or DVD, but you're not that guy. If I could have, from my knowledge, if I could have done, I would have done more for me if I could have, but there's limited ability. So I think that's the one thing that people got to be careful. It's like Bryson DeChambeau. I admire his hard work, but you don't put on 30 pounds of muscles in 4 months. That's not muscle. You would have to do a good body composition. And if you can put on, I'll tell you, it's hard. Jason Zuback and I have talked to you. It's hard to put on a muscle. In my own limited experience as an athlete, I started lifting weights. I was about probably 130 something pounds. When I finished my college career, I played my last year at about 195, somewhere between that. And I lifted all the time. That's 9 years. And I've got a short, stocky body, which is easy to put it on,
Yeah,
or easier.
You're built for weightlifting.
Yeah, I'm built for it, and some people aren't. So all I'm saying is he didn't put on 30 pounds of muscle. Now, when you put on that much weight, what it does is anchor you. One time, you talk about crazy things, man. The fastest I ever swung a club head, and now it's technology way we measured it then, but it's relative to what I was using. I had swung clubs with ankle weights on my legs. And it anchored me down. And I could really swing. Well, when you have that much mass, he's anchored down like a tether pole, like a tether ball. Yeah. Now he can really swing around it. I'm not saying he didn't put on some muscle, and I admire his hard work, and I admired him to think outside the box. I think
that's good. I mean, I think part of his speed, it would be interesting to, I don't know how you would measure and break it all down, but I think that one of the biggest things people don't even talk about with his new distance is how much radial deviation he has now. The guy had basically no radial deviation in his golf swing, and now he's got massive. He's added a whole other lever to his system and his intent. Like before, he swung like every other golfer. Now he's literally trying to rip the cover off the ball. So yeah, I mean, there's just miles per hour just in intent alone.
Yeah, and that's well, Greg, they're heavy light. Normal club swinging, which has been in track and field for a long time, but with weighted implements in the throws. But you're right, it's the intent to swing that much fast. And the other thing is, he's at an age, I know in Olympic weightlifting, they feel, I think, I could be wrong, it may have changed, but at one time, you're going to get your best snatch results, which is the fastest of all the three lifts, in your early 20s. That your speed kind of reached that potential. So it is tough to put on club. Now for the average player, and they take the super speed or the heavy, light, regular, that has never trained speed, anybody that's never trained something is going to get some degree of improvement.
Sure. I tell people all the time, it's always would be interesting just to a bunch of groups, and whether it's Mach 3 or super speed or anything. And look, I think those things sometimes are great motivators for people because they enjoy it and it gives them a reason to do it. So that has value in and of itself. But if I just took my driver or whatever and did the equal number of reps just swinging my driver just as hard, I would guarantee that my results would basically be the same.
Yeah,
pretty close.
It all goes back to Charlie Francis. If you want to run fast, if you want to be fast, you got to run fast, and you got to eventually run it. If you're going to practice sprint training for someone who's fairly accomplished and got good mechanics, you have to run your sprints have to be about 95% of your best. You can't get better at now. Young kids who've never trained will, and that's why I see people, and I won't get into all that, but the different methodology. Oh, they got so much better doing this. How long did they train? Well, this is their first year or two. Well,
no kidding.
It's more difficult when you get someone that's in the PGA Tour players. They've been very good, and it's very hard to make a lot of improvement. And what you're really trying to do, I know you're trying to elongate their careers and prevent injury. And one of the things I'd like to ask you, you've worked with those guys. I haven't. I worked a little bit with the late Payne Stewart and Tommy Kite through Chuck. I like to ask you this question. I've always thought they should approach their practice with full clubs like sprinters do. In other words, there's an optimum number of balls to hit before the speed drops and your technique drops. And I've often thought they ought to get some biomechanical, all the different things that can measure your biomechanics of swing.
You're talking about volume, right? Like the way we would in our world.
Yeah.
Like what's the ideal volume of work to be done?
Yeah, and so you take a flight scope or a TrackMan, and then you take a K-Vest or something. Okay, at what point, let's say at 400 swings, no matter what clubs I've used that day, at 400 swings, my mechanics change or my speed drop. Then, for whatever clubs you use that, write that down. Never swing more than 350. Leave yourself a 50 rep margin in case you're a little tired. Then the other thing, when you're practicing that day, say you're going to go out and only hit 350. Ooh, I start to notice it at 250, Do you stay there and fight it? No, you walk away, especially with mechanics. And I think they need to go heavy days, medium days, light days, or at least know where they lose it, and they need to monitor that every day. Now, I don't know if maybe some guys have done that. I'm not around it.
I think certain guys kind of have an intuitive feel for about how much they can do. You know, one of the things I talk to sometimes with some of the coaches as well is like, what's the stress load, right? Because there's practicing where guys are going, I'm just going to do some chipping and putting, or they're going to just go hit some balls and play 18. And there are others where they're trying to make it more game like we talked about before, the competition. So where practice is trying to be much more competitive, and they have real performance goals in practice. I got to hit this many balls and these distances and make these putts and do all that stuff. Like even just looking at that stress load, which is basically what you're talking about in our world, right? When volume, sets, reps, weight, load, all the things that we talk about, we know there's certain volume of work before performance diminishes, et cetera. I think you have the same thing in golf, to your point, for sure. And I think that depending on how you practice, the load is actually higher if it's a really competitive type of practice versus going to the range and hitting balls and doing those type of things from a
Sure.
reps perspective.
No question. I just think as the years go on, I think as this golf has gotten into all the science, I think there'll be a player that really scientifically starts to monitor that and measure that more.
Yeah, look, part of it, I think a lot of these guys hit more balls than they should for psychological reasons.
Oh yeah, because because Ben Hogan, the great Hogan, went out and practiced afterwards, and that worked for Ben Hogan.
And now everybody does that.
Ben Hogan was, and I'm not an expert on it. I'm not an expert in anything, but he was a unique individual. He had a unique swing. He had joint mobilities that no one else. He was unbelievable.
Like a VJ. Right?
Yeah.
Just so hypermobile and, all kinds of stuff. And
I mean, everybody talks about, if you watch a telecast, he's still the most talked about when they talk about hitting golf balls. But no one's ever been able to swing like him. And if you look at all the great swings, they're all different, but they're all pretty much the same in impact.
Oh, yeah. They all are. So let me ask you a couple of questions here. I want to hit you with a couple of questions about, some are like our training world, and just, obviously you've been around this for so long and have so much knowledge. What do you think about today's world of what I call the anti-movement exercises, right? We do anti-rotation, anti-extension, anti-this, foul off, press that, don't ever do crunches or flex your spine. And, so if you're training a rotary athlete, a golfer yourself, obviously it's a rotary sport. Do you do anti-rotation? Do you do rotation? Or do you do rotation and anti-rotation? Like, what do you think about this resisting movement stuff?
I always call it's the cancel culture of strength and conditioning. First of all, if you're going to move through that plane, you got to train it. And you got to train extension. You have to train, flexion. We all did sit-ups and threw medicine balls, did that. You got to remember this. You always got to remember here's the key thing. What is their motivation? Are they trying to sell you something? They trying to talk down to you because they've done this research? Have they done the research on humans or cadavers? Big difference. Sure. I think, just think about it. When you do a simple thing like a press, that's anti-rotation and free weights because you got to control it. I've had guys that couldn't.
Sure.
So every time you lift a weight, the other thing is the core. And all these things has turned into cottage industries. They're trying to sell you something. People say, you don't have anything for sale. I said, no, I don't have anything for sale. All I can tell you is what I did, but it's not revolutionary. So I think if you throw the medicine ball on a wall and catch it, that's anti-rotation. You've rotated, and now you've caught it, and if you get close, you can decelerate. If you do Russian twist correctly, it's really at the end you're trying to control that range. If you're going to go through that range, you have to learn to control it. Now, Mark Comerford showed me several things how you actually measure that. For example, if you want to know you control rotation with your lower body, take a TheraBand. Now you're laying supine, hook line, and now When I pull this way, can you keep your knees there?
Right.
Eccentrically.
Instead of counter rotating.
Yeah. And then you do the same. You put it around your lower legs. Now, can you hold it here? That's a simple thing. And you can do it stand. But I hear people talk about all these things, but they never talk about, have they measured it? You have to, all the things you're talking about are the never do this people. Oh, never do back squats. Well, we did them all at the Bulls. Did I do everybody back squats? Some guys couldn't, so I did this. Now, the other thing they don't understand about all the single leg, and I have nothing, single leg work is fine. I went to see Angel Spazoff 6 years ago. I said, single leg squats. No, that's where it all came from. You don't know. My point being, go online and watch some people doing heavy single leg squats, the rear foot, and you'll see that torso. You'll see when they come out of it to go into a great extension moment and back, you're twisting that pelvis because one is anterior and one is posterior to start. There's nothing wrong with the exercise. I'm not saying that. But what that group of people say, everything else is bad. Mm-hmm. You limit your toolbox. You apply the toolbox to what the athlete or the person can do. You don't force feed some. So you can't make blanket statements. Did we, it's like people said, how many people did you pull from close to the floor? A few. Not everybody, because they couldn't. I took what they technically could do correctly, and we use that in all, whether it be jumping, whatever it be.
So yeah, a guy can't pull the floor, you let him hang pull or whatever.
You adapt to
whatever it is.
That's the art of coaching, is you adapt to the athlete. You don't adapt the program. You adapt the program to the athlete, not the athlete to the program. Go ahead. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, again, I just think there's so much of this anti-movement stuff.
Oh.
And it's like, come on, really? I mean, I'm not saying that doing some rotary stability or, planks as an anti-extension movement, that those are bad exercises. But when to me, you throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you're not going to you're training rotary athletes and you're not going to train them to rotate explosively. And then you're going to ask them to go do it as their sport. To me, sounds insane.
Well, let me ask you this. I'll take it in a different. That's like telling a sprinter not to sprint because he might pull a hamstring.
Yeah, correct. You might.
And the other thing, you take your toolbox and squeeze it. But again, are these people's motivation selling you something?
Yeah, and look, there's a lot of big name people promoting a lot of these concepts.
Yeah, and I have nothing wrong with that. I know them. Just don't. I hate to be political, but they're almost like one side of the politicals. If you don't agree with me, we're going to holler enough at you and put you down because you don't agree with us.
Yeah, correct. Look,
and all I tell them, I started lifting in 1960, so that's what, 60 years ago?
Yeah.
I've seen it all come and go 2 or 3 times. People say, how much core work did you do at the Bulls? Not until really late. Oh, you didn't do any core work? I said, when we squatted, clean, jumped, sprint, run, the core doesn't work?
Yeah, all those... The whole core thing became a thing, like with this whole transverse abdominis thing. Whatever it was, 15, when everybody's drawing their belly button in and sucking their gut and all that craziness.
Here's the thing. If you want to learn something, go to the originator, not the impersonators. Because I know someone that came back from Australia and had it all screwed up, and I'll leave it nameless. But I got with Mark Comerford, and I also got with Paul Hodges. Those exercises were designed for people that had back injuries.
And for people who don't know, Paul Hodges was like the main guy behind
and
Joel Richardson, Hodges and Hodge, kind of their book.
Yeah.
And
I spent 2 days with him, and then I had Comerford a bunch of times from Australia. Great guy, he's a good friend of mine. And he said the TA will work unless you're dead. It's when it works. And they've taken these exercises and have healthy, we got to do the core. Well, he can't hold a plank for young kids, a good basic exercise. But, you're not moving. Mm-hmm. Stability, and you're not standing.
Yeah, not active, yeah.
The other thing they don't understand about that, all those TA and multifidus are what they call low load exercises. So if you had pain walking, sitting, or standing, they're not always going to relate to other things. So anyway.
Good. I love that. So let me give you another question here. So this is a big thing in our industry, you know, and again, obviously there's some sport, you know, like we said, we don't like sports specificity maybe, but there is some specificity probably this question because, you know, the famous question of how strong is strong enough. And obviously in golf, you mentioned Bubba as an example, right? Guy's one of the biggest hitters in the world, right? I don't think anybody would define him in our world, in the strength and conditioning world. I don't see him doing a 2x body weight squat or any of those type of things, right? So under any definition in our world, you know, in the true strength and conditioning world, he would be considered weak, right? I mean, the way we would define it, and that's my question, is like, in golf, how strong is strong enough? How important is this absolute, or call it even relative strength in golf to be able to hit it far?
I don't have the science behind that. And when you look at Bubba, he hits it long because of leverages, his appendages. He's got such long arms. He's tall. Now, if Bubba played basketball, he would need that strength, has body armor to get through a season.
Sure.
You know, so, but he's, you know, you got to be careful screwing up with a guy like that.
Justin
I can't
Thomas
give you.
Is not a guy with big levers. Obviously, he's not going to pass any type of true strength test that we have. No. I'm not saying he's a weak kid. I'm just saying, like, in the strength and conditioning world, he would fail all measures of what we would consider. But he kills it.
But we're looking at our measures are based on team sports where there's contact and where golf there isn't. The only thing I think that would help golfers is muscle is the shock absorber of the body to help them endure, because I see a lot of guys having injuries, and I think and I don't know this, so any golf professional listening, I don't upset you, but I know one of the things, the way they straighten that left leg and jump off it and almost lock it, a la Tiger, you know, and two of the, you know, Dustin Johnson and Koepka both had problems with that front knee, you know, and that, you know, golf is the way they play today is very hard on the body. For sure. At that level, because they're not going out there. They used to be, I'm only swinging 90%. If you're hitting that thing 320, 350, you're not swinging 90. You're not swinging 90%. You know, you know. So I think you try to get them strong enough to help protect them. I don't know how much. In young kids, if you have young high school golfers, depending on their body type, developing some overall strength, I think is good. But with an advanced athlete, you've got to be very careful what you do. For two reasons. You don't want to have a negative effect, and you can have a negative psychological effect.
Exactly. All right, next question. Current state of our industry, trends that you either really think are going to be good for us going forward, or ones that you go, oh crap, that's bad news, we're going down a dark hole.
I like the fact that people are emphasizing strength. I like the fact that we've got organizations that you can get material that wasn't available in terms of how to do things, technique, guidelines when I was coaching back in the late 60s or through the 70s, and that's how I made a lot of my friends, is contacting those people like John Garmer, Mike Stone, Don Chu, Charlie Francis, etc. So I think that's a great trend. The information is out there, and I'm glad to see speed is being emphasized. I think they got to be careful now in the weight room. Well, we got to measure velocity. Well, if you're throwing the medicine ball explosive, you don't have to measure it. You just, if you want to measure the distance, if you're doing Olympic weightlifting, there's no slow movement to it. It's boom, it's an impulse, and that's the thing. And that's the thing. If you look at the great golfers, it's an impulse, boom. Yeah. And I mentioned that about Horace. So I think that point of information and some of the things, I think there's a little bit too much of my way is the right way, and if you don't do it my way, you don't know anything. You know, I'm smarter than you, you know.
A lot of people have had success. You know, I tell people all the time, there are people who have Olympic medals, have Super Bowl rings, wear whatever, World Series rings, you name it. There are people who have done it with free weights. There are people who've done it on old-fashioned Nautilus machines. There are people who have probably done nothing. You name the type of training, there's somebody who's got a world championship medal or ring
And
for
you
it.
can't, and that's why I say you can't measure me or anybody else that's got them by that. What you would have to do is go, what did they do with the guy or gal that's average or fringe? Did they get them to a point where they could be productive? I won't even tell you the sport. I coached a guy, great guy, worked his butt off, smart. I had a call from someone who had played against him. He said, "What did you do?" Because we never thought he would be able to make it at that level. That was one of my proudest moments.
Yeah, I think that our jobs fundamentally are like, again, if you're working with younger kids, it might be as simple as taking a kid who's a JV player and helping him get on varsity, or a kid who's on varsity and making him a starter. And maybe if you're working with a guy who's a good Corn Ferry Tour, help him get on the PGA Tour. A guy who's 150th on the PGA Tour, getting him in the top 50 in the world. Like, you're not going to take some kid or whatever who's so and make him into a PGA Tour player. You're just not going to.
Well, you're not going to take the guy you said that was 150th and make him Tiger Woods.
No. But maybe you can make him 50th or 40th. Or
but you can give him a great career.
And he obviously has talent, or he won even 150th. You're super talented.
Yeah, you can assist him, and then it's the other key thing is their work ethic.
Sure.
And
that you can't control. You can help motivate, hopefully, and inspire a bit. But
I've seen guys not end up having great careers because of the work ethics. Sure. And I give you an example. When I was in high school, and they used to play in the Northern California versus the South All-Star game, and I was nominated for it and didn't make it. I was disappointed. Go to Utah State. The guy that was the player of the game went to SC, went to junior college and transferred to us. He couldn't even make our team.
Wow.
But now here I'm the guy, and I didn't play running back, but I'm the guy keep plugging along because they all told me I was too small to play college football out of high school and stuff like that. So it's your intensity, and you have to here's the thing I always ask coaches when they came. They start telling me, this guy needs to do this, and if you do this and this, I said, can they play? Well, if they can't play, it's like all the screens are great. I have nothing against all the screens. We tested people. If they can't play, it doesn't do you any good. We tested a kid that could jump out of the building, run around the world in 15 seconds. I'm exaggerating. He couldn't play basketball. So what good did it do him? Yeah, so then you have a guy that's a good player, Johnny Paxson, that has great instincts. And then he hits that shot against Phoenix. And he told the story many times. He said, I hit that shot when I was a kid growing up every day in my, out in the garage shooting baskets. So, and John was a much underrated player. He did a lot more than people ever recognized.
Yeah, him and a guy hard to get recognition on that team.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then Billy Cartwright and a lot of guys. But and I worked with a guy named Dave Corzine when I first went to the Bulls. He was the first guy to really buy in. What a great guy! I learned a lot training Dave. And here's one thing. People talk about training, and I know some of the sports science say it's not true, but training less explosive athletes, I found if you have them do cleans or snatches and put the bar at the power position or the jump position, they are so much more efficient in that short motion. And I saw that. Well, comes along Joseph Tihani, sports scientist, says people that are not a dominant fast twitch, the longer the range of motion, the longer they're not as efficient at recruitment. And I saw that. I said, man, that looks so good there. And I put it there. I couldn't, but so you did more of it. And the thing is, when you have that bar and you're on the block and you just, boom, it's all or nothing. You're really recruiting everything. It's an impulse. And that's the key. It's that. Go ahead. Next question.
The rate of force, I think, is a big.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question about this. I know you have a grandson who's now a golfer.
Yeah.
And trying to play some golf. Do you get involved with coach? A, how old is he? And B,
he's 14. He didn't make the golf team. He's got too much of my personality. His coach, who I'm taking lessons from, says he's really got a good swing. But it's interesting. He doesn't load his baseball swing enough on the back leg, and he doesn't load his golf swing enough. Same deal. But yeah, he asked me to train him, and we're just, like today he's coming over and he's lifting. And we'll do our jumps up on the box, and then we'll do some basic strength training and medicine ball. And then tomorrow he'll come over and do speed work. We'll do the basic drills, and we'll do some of them uphill. We'll do the ankle jumps, because I've always believed from that lower limb, that's where calf goal. So it's the
jumps.
God, everything that people, the Achilles tendon. So then we'll work on that. We'll get on a 9-inch box, and he steps off and pops back, and I measure how fast it is. And then I have
jump mat.
Yeah, I developed the timing vice back in the 80s. I tried to market it, and it was, you never want to be the first to do anything, because coaches wanted the stopwatch. Now they have some very elaborate ones where you don't have wires and all that. And then I have him step off a 12-inch box, land, make sure his knees don't go in, good posture, and then he does one long jump. So that's what we'll work today. Tomorrow we'll work his speed and those jumps. And on the other days, we work the jumps up into strength. And I just start very easy, and I just start with, nothing is stressed. The biggest thing you got to do with young kids, the muscles will adapt first, the tendons, ligaments second. The third thing is the discs take longer to adapt. You got to be very progress slowly. And, some people think of workouts, someone should come out exhausted. No, they should come out so they can adapt. If you beat the hell out of them every day, you're not going to get anything. You mentioned one other point, things I don't like. I see too much emphasis on the heavy sled. It's a great strength device, but there's no eccentric contraction. And they say, well, we're getting faster. Well, you take kids that have never trained, you're getting them stronger.
Right.
And there's no this. And now they just came out with a study. The sleds help the first 10 yards heavy. And then
it's acceleration work.
Yeah. And then as Charlie says, well, and I know someone criticized him, so, well, his 10% rule doesn't work. He was working with world-class sprinters. You don't want to go out there and do, you wouldn't want to over assist them, and you wouldn't want to over resist them. It's like the PGA Tour players. You wouldn't want to start putting too heavy or too light of clubs in their swing.
That's why they say if you're doing the uphill and downhill running, you're talking about 2 to 3% grade at best.
And you don't improve more than 5%. That's the thing I found. Well, we were fortunate. And I went back and looked at the hill. It was so slight. Here's the other thing I like about downhill versus assisted pulling. It's natural. It's a natural application of force. The other thing is, think how the eccentric overload, that stretch shortening cycle is as fast as it can be, because it's boom, because you're moving a little faster. And people, I just
got to find the right hill.
And people always ask me, well, what's the most, if you only had one thing to train, what would you do? I said speed. I can overload it, underload it. I can develop strength. Second thing would be weight training of some kind. They said, why not plyos? I said, what do you think running is?
Plyos.
And here's
shortest ground contact time of all.
Yeah, and here's the thing that we used, and I picked it up from reading BenShearGolf stuff. I would have guys wear a 10-pound weight belt. A belt may not remember them. They came out in the 80s. They were foam, and I would have them run with that, and then take it off. Their speed was always better because the eccentric overload or the stretch shortening cycle was not elongated that much, and they just had that slight 5 to 10% body weight overload, 10% I believe it is, that it improved that. So if you can't, here's another thing, if you can't teach a guy to bound for different reasons, if you just run with a slight overload, you will get you will improve that quality.
Sure.
So I believe in plyometrics. Don't get me wrong. I don't mean
we're
to
finally talking properly, I think, about stiffness in our world a little bit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
creating stiffness.
It's been around for 100 years, a billion years.
But now all of a sudden people are actually starting.
Oh, that's the big buzzword, is stiffness. And I told people, when I was a kid, we used to do calf raises, donkey raises. We did all that stuff for our calves. And then all of a sudden that's in vogue. I'll tell you one that works good. Is take someone doing ankle jumps after they've been some preparation. Get them by the waist and assist them for about 5 and tell them to keep jumping when you let go, and they will jump higher a little bit, because now they've learned to eccentrically adapt to a greater overload because they're jumping a little higher. You have to do it to it. That's not anyway.
That's awesome stuff. All right. I know you're going to have to run, but let me give you a couple.
No, go ahead. I've got time. Go ahead.
Okay. Let me ask you these. I'm going to give you one word answer for different populations of golfers. I want to know, your choices are, the answer is they need to improve flexibility, strength, or speed.
Okay.
So if I have a junior female golfer, which one?
Strength.
Okay. Junior male golfer.
Now, have they ever trained?
Most junior male golfers, if they've trained, it's not, I would consider their training age young.
I would say strength training.
Okay. Adult men.
Flexibility, mobility.
Okay. Adult women.
Strength.
Seniors.
Mobility and some strength training.
Yeah. Good.
So you ask for one answer, mobility, because most of them can't move.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, for a lot of population of, the average golfer in the United States is a 54-year-old man, right? And I tell people, they're doing all this strength stuff and speed and super speed. I'm like, I'll tell you right now, the fastest way to get that guy more club head speed is give him a bigger turn.
Well, I live right on. I live on the Oasis golf course it's a private club here in Loveland, Ohio. Great Arnold Palmer course, and I live on the 16th hole where they have to hit it over water. And I sit out there and I'm Jim Nantz commenting on their swings. And, it's hard to make a golf swing and you can only turn that far. Yeah. You got to be able to, I'm sitting here and I'm not great, but I'm just sitting and I can turn like that.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So you got to be able to turn. And I haven't done here's the emphasis. I get up in the morning. I can spend up to an hour in mobility. I take a bar, what they call a scraper, and I do all my lower body. So then I do a lot of laying on the floor, rolling the knees, circles, hip movements. Then I lay on the foam roller, and then I'll do some body weight squats. I'll spend literally sometimes an hour in the morning just so now I can move, because if you have no range of motion, you cannot create any club heads. I don't care if you're King Kong. If you can swing the club this far, you're not going to create any motion.
Yeah, and I think that unfortunately, as we age, our tissue quality deteriorates to a point that mobility goes away unless you're putting some real effort into it.
Well, I see a physical therapist every 3 weeks to keep that mobility.
Doing hands-on work.
Yeah. And and I'm fortunate that I have the financial means to do it. Not everybody does, but there are things you can do. If you're a golf instructor and you see someone that can't turn, you're doing them a disservice to take their money. If they have no range of motion, they got no chance. And one of the things I've always asked golf instructors now, I said, be honest with me. Just because of my experience, and you think you should be courteous. If you don't think I can play this game,
save me some time and money.
Yeah, my late father was big in auto racing. He's in the Sprint Car Hall of Fame, and he ran an organization out in Northern California called NARC, and the racetrack in Calistoga is named after him. And a race driver came up to him and one day and said, "Lou, what do you think? I can be a good driver?" He looked at him. He said, "You know what the word never means?" He was a man of few words.
Yeah, unfortunately, we live in a world where, well, I shouldn't even say unfortunate, because maybe that's not fair. There are people who just love the enjoyment of the game, being outside, spending time with family and friends, right? Like, it's one thing if you're approaching it from that side. It's another thing if you're taking lessons to actually try to become, let's call unquote, quote unquote, good at golf, right? And you don't have those physical traits. I do agree that a lot of people are spending a lot of money on golf lessons that, like, and if you're going to take those lessons, just do some chipping and putting lessons.
Yeah,
you would get a much better return for your investment.
Well, here's what did I say about athletes? You adapt the program to the athlete. So if the person's golf swing's never going to get better, try to find them some strokes in the other part of the game. And I think golf instructors do a great job. And the amazing thing to me about golf, there are so many ways to teach it because none of us are the same. And in the great golf book, Ron Gring quotes, I can't think of it right now. The engineer that wrote that book about golf, you know the name of it.
What, golfing machine?
Yeah. There's so many infinite ways to swing the damn thing. And if you look at probably the 10, 20 best players in the world, none of their swings look exactly the same. At impact they may have, but I mean, Nicklaus lifted his left heel, Hogan was this way, Snead was this way, Byron Nelson had the leg dry. They're all had their own little idiosyncrasies.
Yeah, look, we're all bio individuals, and we all have to find a way that works for us. And look, at the end of the day, like you said, a lot of people don't have turns. But then you also have the golf world who telling some guy if he moves a little bit laterally, oh, you're sliding and swing. It's like, well, guess what? If I can't move in the transverse plane, I better move sideways, or I got no chance to hit the ball anywhere. Like at some point, we have to actually stop calling those things faults and say, well, hey, people who move like this is the best way to create it. If you don't have rotary, right, you might need more lateral or vice versa.
I think that's what Greg and Dave do a great job of, and I think golf instructions, like we were talking about the buzzwords in the strength and conditioning field now. Well, the golf profession, it's who's got the great swing. Now we'll all swing like this person. And I don't think you want a method teacher. I think great teachers, I've said it again, the way I trained one player and I trained another player, the exercise may look relatively the same, but they were different than what I was doing with them. They were doing. So I think it's, again, you adapt to what the person can do. And I took a lesson from Bob Toski. I took it because it was on my bucket list. And what a character. I started to talk to him and he said, Al, did you come here to take a lesson from me, or did you come here to tell me how to? I said, no, sir.
But maybe I have a couple things I can share with you.
No, I said, I like that. I said, I like that, Bob, because you remind me of my father. You didn't question him. You didn't ask him. You just did. And in fact, Bob Toski's always used a 2x4. So I have a company, unfortunately, with the Corona thing that screwed things up. They have made a foam 2x4. So when you put it down, people won't feel threatened, fear of hitting it and getting hurt, because you can put it alongside the ball and there's different drills you can do. So I call it the Bob Toski Board of Education. I'm hoping to get enough made that Bob would like to sell them, but it's just interesting. And I've taken a ton of lessons from it. And here's the thing: every time I take a lesson, I'll play well, and then the further I'm away from, I slide right back into the habit they were trying to break. And of course, I never think that's it. It's got to be something else. And then I go read all the magazines and all this.
The whole motor learning component and changing movement patterns for people who have. So that's a whole science that's beyond, all the things we're talking. And that's really one of the hardest things. That's the struggle for golf instructors in general. Like, our job might be to give them the physical tools to be able to do what they're trying to do. But the golf instructor's job of taking somebody who's maybe been playing golf for 20, 30 years and not doing it properly and try to get them to do something new, especially without, shooting 30 strokes worse through that process, because nobody obviously wants to do that, right? So it's like the minute they have a bad score going with whatever is quote unquote new or the direction they should be going, people abandon it. So it's a really tricky, from a profession perspective, to get people to do the work, like you've said, enough reps to make those motor pattern change.
Well, yeah, and it's like, I love the Happy Gilmore drill. I have found once I get doing that, I hit the ball. First couple swings after I hit is the best swings I make. In fact, one day when my brother Dick came here about 3 years ago, I wasn't hitting that good. I started doing it, free swing, and not even hitting the, and then bam, but it's like all motor learning. Once you get something, then you keep trying to work on it, even though you already have it. And I have my golf. What do I want to call him? Dick Drager out of Michigan there, in Omaha. He's my go-to golf guy. Hey, I've tried this. What do you think? Every week I call him with something new. He's my golf psychologist.
Well, look, the fact that you have to call him every week is where the problem starts. You got something new.
Oh yeah. Well, we call each other at our age to make sure we're both vertical still.
There you go. You're not going anywhere. But look, I think that a lot of people, all of the trying of different stuff and having new stuff, while it may not always be the most productive towards improvement, is also just part of the enjoyment of golf. It's what makes golf so fun, right? So it's like, I'll talk to people like, oh, I know this is not a good idea for my swing, but I just wanted to try it. It's like,
oh yeah,
whatever. And what are you going to say to that, right? It's like,
oh yeah, that's the fun. It's kind of, you go out there and, I don't know a teaching aid that I haven't bought, and and although some of the simplest ones, the ball between the arm and the Board of Education work the best, but I love all this stuff, and then I think that's what makes it fun. I think that's what keeps you coming back is the last hole, or you make a great shot. You make a couple
great swing a day.
Yeah, one great swing a day. And then that computers and golf are the two most frustrating things there are. It's just like we're fooling with, we couldn't get the volume. But I think one of the things I'd advise all young coaches, don't become a disciple of any one method or coach. Everybody has something, and some of the people I may disagree with how they do certain things, that doesn't mean they don't do a lot of things well. So don't take, because you don't agree with that guy on the one thing, not to listen to what else they have to offer. I've learned from a lot of people. Some of them I don't agree with a lot, but they said one thing that made sense for me. So don't become narrow-minded where it becomes a cult. And I see that happening, that if you don't agree with this guy, or you don't agree, then you won't listen to the other side of the argument. And unfortunately, in this country, we have the huge problem with that.
Yes. Yeah, and look, we have that both in golf instruction as well as the strength
and society.
Yeah, in society and in our personal profession. In golf instruction, people are in camps. I'm a stack and tilt guy. I'm a this guy. I'm a that guy. A GG swing tips guy. A whatever guy.
And you know what you need to do is, okay, I'm going to line up these 20 guys. It could be amateurs. Here are 10 amateurs swing. Now, how is that going to apply to this guy, that guy? How can you say this is going to work for him or her?
Correct. It's bio-individual, right? I think that training, I think there are principles that apply to everyone, but then the actual bio-individuality of each person then needs to be taken into consideration.
You got to get down to the nuts and bolts, and we all learn differently, and it's, for me, the first 2 times I do a drill, I'll do it good, and by the 3rd or 4th time, I'm trying to do it so right, and then I screw it up, and then I just, if I could blank my mind out and just go play, I'd be as good as whatever I could be. But
you enjoy it. That's the most important.
No, it's you know what it is? My wife says, why do you keep taking? I like the challenge. I need something. I can't lift weights like I used to. I can't sprint like I used to. I try to. I've got a hamstring problem. But I can't do a lot of things I used to do. So I need something to keep my mind. And I got that golf net, and I got my JC video in there. I can video and then I look at swings 15 years ago, and I thought that was bad. Boy, that was pretty good. What the hell was I thinking?
Well, look, but that's also made you great at what you do. You're always striving to be better. You're always looking for more knowledge. You're always looking to improve on wherever you are. And obviously, in our world, you have been to the pinnacle that very few people have been. But I've been fortunate.
I've been fortunate, and I guess
your luck and fortune comes somewhat with your knowledge and your hard work, and
I appreciate.
You make your own fortune for sure.
Well, my late father always said, "You're never so good you can't get better," and that has stuck with he. It's the great Bob Toski said. Not Toski, the great coach from Nebraska, Bob Devaney, made a great comment, and I've used it, and you've heard me say it probably. Never become too impressed with yourself, because the size of your funeral depends on the weather. We all think that when we're gone, we're going to be written in the history books like Napoleon or Washington of course, or Jefferson. Of course, now today they write them out of the history books. The morons teaching. I'm sorry. I was in education. Don't even get me there. No, we're not. We're passing through this period of time. We're fortunate to be here. We're fortunate to live in America, and fortunate to be able to do what we've been able to do and meet the people we've had and the associations and our families. But unfortunately, they're not going to write a history book about us. We're not going to be mentioned. So enjoy your time here and keep in perspective who you are and your relative value to the world.
Yeah, they might write a book about you. They're not going to write one about me, but they might want to write about you.
Hey, it'll be the shortest book in the library.
Nah, look, you've done a lot, and you've earned the respect. And while, yes, sure, you've been fortunate, but luck and opportunity comes through hard work and preparation. It's not by accident. No, they didn't, Jerry Reinsdorf and those people, they didn't go find you and go, hey, let me go throw a dartboard that list of names. They said, hey, here's a guy who's had some success. Here's a guy who works. I mean, you talk about the people, I know your stories going back to the day, and, with the Carmelo Boscos and like the people who are the pioneers of our world, you were right in the trenches with those guys, side by side, asking the hard questions, testing the methodologies, putting the people to the test, truly learning what works. I mean, like you said, nowadays kids, who's starting in our world. I mean, I'm obviously I don't have as much experience as you, but I've been in this industry for over 30 years now myself. And, even when I started, there was no Perform Better Summit. There was no TPI. There was not even the internet. You couldn't go look up something. There was nowhere to get information. You had to go out and find it on your own for real.
And you had to, and sometimes through your own sheer intuitiveness, you figured things out. And that's the one thing that I'm a little concerned about. There is something about figuring out, and I figured it out from my own practical experience. And that is, I figured out right away that if you want to be explosive, you got to train explosive. If you want to be fast, you got to train fast. You've got to run fast. And now we got all this velocity stuff. You don't have time when you're coaching 40 guys to measure them. If you're throwing the medicine ball explosively, lifting explosively, trying to come out of the bottom. If you're sprinting, it's great theory, but you can't do it with it.
I like to measure as part of an evaluation tool to check
Sure.
my work down the road. Say, are you faster? Are you throwing harder? But look, you can take those, medicine balls that don't bounce, get a person by a wall, and have them far enough away from the wall that if they don't throw it really hard and fast, it doesn't get back in the air to it, right? It's like, there's the measure.
Well, the other thing is you could go to a football field and put everybody at the goal line, and kids know what their best are. So, okay, this group, we put a group of kids that, let's say, throw it 30 feet. Well, you didn't throw it over the 10-yard line, so you didn't do it. Or weightlifting, okay. Here's the volume. Here. I want you to do 3 reps at 85%. And you're clean. You can't do it. Obviously, you don't create the velocity. The training is self-reflective. I'm not saying that's bad, but you can't get so locked up in data and numbers. Here's the other thing is, how many people I tell you a great story. When I was coaching at Merle High School, we went to 4-a-days. Today I couldn't coach. They wouldn't allow me. I could tell you a great story about the athletic director at Memphis University. He played for me. And the last day of practice, he missed a block. And I won't tell you what I said. I grabbed him by the face mask and I said, you so-and-so, that's the same block you missed against Pinot Valley, and Chris, our quarterback, got hurt. I wasn't very nice about today. You couldn't do that. But, we were going to 4 days. So on the 3rd day, I had a gentleman, a great friend of mine, passed away, Jim Inger. He replaced Bill Walsh at Washington High School, and I lived a block away from Washington High School in Fremont. And for some reason, he wasn't coaching for a few years, so he came to coach for me. And he said, Al, look how the kids are coming on the field. I said, yeah, they're putting one foot in front of the other. He said, no, Al, look, they're tight and stiff. If we keep the pads on this morning, we're going to guys took the pads off, went through everything unpadded, easy, no problems. Great lesson. So when they come into your weight room or if you're on the field coach, or if you're golf coach, look how they move early. Have some either self-evaluation or test. If they're not moving well, if you're doing the running drills, I mean, if your early swings, or whatever you do to your warm-up should be an evaluation, not only to prepare them, but an evaluation for, are they going to train what I'm asking? So if you're going to do a big speed workout, and there's tight and stiff, I'd advise you to find something on a more gentler, maybe some medicine ball tempo or something non-explosive and fast, and walk away.
One of the things that hurts the golf kids training wise is, and I think it's almost any individual sport, is you can't recreate the intensity that comes training with a team. So like for me, as my job, I train primarily golfers and ice hockey players. And even if I have the same ice hockey player come and do one-on-one with me, and then the next day he's a group of 4 or 5 guys, 6 guys, whatever, what you get out of that guy in a group of 6 versus by himself, there's 15%, let's call it. And I'm talking about guys who are self-motivated. I'm not talking about lazy, non-hardworking guys. I'm talking about guys who are giving you the best they can on their own. But there's 15% in the tank that these golf kids are never getting, because they don't have that type of environment. And golf is, like you said, it's still a competition. And kids who know how to compete and people who are competitive, when you put them in the weight room, and one kid might be stronger, another kid might be faster, another kid might be more flexible, whatever. Everybody might have their area they're the best in. But the kid who's the least flexible, he's trying to be more flexible, so he's not so far behind. The kid who's, the strongest, the kid who's not quite as strong, he's trying to keep up. That environment is really lacking right now, I think, in youth golf. And one of the things we try to do in our junior program is bring some of that to it. But I think it's something nobody talks about.
Well, you're absolutely right, because and especially when you're out competing on your own. As an old man, I'll occasionally, because I can't squat real well anymore, I'll go use the leg press, which I don't like it, because the new leg presses, they don't let you lay flat down on the hip sleds.
Right.
And they flex you up. But I'll go over there and I'll just instinctively lift better. In fact, everybody thinks I'm smart, right? So I'm used to kilos. So I'm going over, okay, I'm going to do push press. I'll go the bar, and then I'll go 65 pounds. Then I'll go 85, and I'll go, well, I misfigured the weight. I was going from the bar to, because I
Olympic lifting guy. You do your math in kilos.
Yeah, so I put the weight on there. Well, that was 75. So when I was using, I thought 90 was 100. When I was using 100, it was 110. And I was pushed back, and and it always felt better over there. But I was with a group of guys. I wasn't competing, but we're talking, and everything's better. I can do more pull-ups.
Yeah, your manpower comes out when there's people watching.
Well, I think it's just you're interacting with people, your nervous system, as opposed to where I'm lifting in my basement. And, I'm down to dumbbell squats, which is depressing, but I do, the problem when you get older, that toolbox gets small. The one advice I'd give to people that I didn't follow, it's better to sometimes do something very moderate and live to train another day.
Sure, that's good advice.
And also, don't remember what you used to do.
We all like to think we can continue to still
No,
do it.
well, I know I can't, but it actually can get depressing. If you were an athlete of any kind, and whatever type of training you're doing or sport, and you remember what you could do, and you look at what you're doing now, and you almost gets to the point for me where I'm not sure I did that. Did I really do that? Because it's like I look at my grandson. They warm up easy. They move around. Well, I'm telling people I'm spending an hour in the morning warming up.
Yeah. He's like, he walks in the door. He's like, oh, it's hot outside. I'm ready to go. Let's go.
Yeah. It's like Eric Hillen used to say, who was great assistant to mine, great strength coach.
I know Eric a little bit.
And he used to say, Al would have 1 hour of training, 2 hours of rehab. He couldn't figure how I could lift all the time. Well, we had massage therapists, so every day they were was getting 20 to 30 minutes of work on me all the time.
Free treatment's good.
A guy that had great enthusiasm you were talking about is a guy named Dragomir Sorokin. I'd bring him in to work with the players and Lance and even Horace and those guys. He'd get them so fired up. I think what you were talking in that culture of a team, there is that testosterone. There is that energy.
Yeah.
And when you're by yourself, golf is a lonely game.
Yeah.
And
I think the golf kids, the training would be so far superior if they have. I mean, the only time they really get that is if they play collegiate golf. So for a couple of years, and depending on obviously where they go to school, they might get a couple of years of that. But I think that through those developmental times, being in the gym with other kids trying to achieve the same thing and kind of just day-to-day competing is invaluable. Like I just tell my hockey kids, I would rather see them come in a group than, on their own, unless they have some like issues we're trying to work through or whatever, that's fine.
Yeah.
Then I don't want them competing and doing something stupid. But in general, I think you just get so much more. And, group training really for golf is something you don't see a lot of, especially at the youth level. And a lot of parents, you have my private instructor, I have my private this, my private that, personal trainer. And look, that's all great. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying, but if you take even four kids and put them to train together, you will, in a short window, you will get a lot more bang for your buck.
Well, the other thing, because I was a high school coach, was my favorite job of all time, coaching at Monroe High School. You were talked about all the honors I got.
Oh yeah.
The one I cherish the most is they named the field after me.
That's awesome.
And they only did it, and the principal, who wasn't my principal, because I'd been long gone out of there, he said, we had no choice. Your former players insisted. And that's really, I said, can't you name it Al Vermeil in his players field? I said, they deserve the credit. They put up with me. But I think you're right. I think the other thing when you're doing that, there's some competition. Well, when they're out there competing, are they going to fold their tent? And how do they handle it? The hardest thing with golf, I think, and this is just my opinion, I'm no psychologist, I think it's the hardest psychological game because it beats you down. At least for me, it beats you down. And, I've quit more times. I've taken my clubs off the golf cart, put them, that's the last time I'm playing. Then 2 or 3 days, if I do this, but I mean, it is psychologically demoralizing.
Golf is hard, man. It's just like, there's no way around it. Golf's really hard.
I think I played baseball. I played on a Legion team that was no good, but we played against Tug McGraw. He played for Vallejo, which was a much bigger city than Calistoga, and he wasn't their best pitcher, if I don't remember at that time. But I got some base hits, but I'd rather go hit a 60-mile-an-hour fastball. I'm going to be more successful in hitting that damn golf ball.
It doesn't seem like it should be that way, but somehow it is.
It just.
Yeah,
I think it's staring back at you. You know what? When you look at that ball, it's staring back at you and said, "I've got you."
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things as a strength coach why I like golf. People always like, you work with golfers. I said, it's kind of this magic combination of this ballistic rotary power of a shot putter combined with like this fine motor control of a marksman. And no other sport, maybe baseball pitching a bit or stuff like that, really has that disparity of the things you need to bring together to be great.
Yeah, and in fact, trying to improve my swing speed, I'll go out and throw the girls' discus. I got to be careful. I get a little tendonitis in my elbow. I threw the discus in high school. I wasn't built for the disc. I was a good shot putter. I threw 54.9, but in California in 1963, that didn't get you any place. But what shot putting did is taught me biomechanics. I was reading. Here's a great. I'm at Utah State. I'm going to throw in one indoor meet. I threw it 1650 feet 3 inches. And L.J. Sylvester was a great thrower. Utah State had a lot of great discus throwers because of the coach Ralph Mon. They had one guy named Glenn Passy that weighed. I think he threw it in 185 or 190 in the NCAAs and won it back in the early 60s or late 50s, and he only weighed that. Per pound was best discus thrower. And anyway, LJ watched me throw the shot in front of the circle. He said, "What are you doing that for? Why don't you get back and glide?" I said, "LJ, I read where if you want to throw X feet, you're only going to throw it 5 feet further then you stand. He said, Al, you know what my best stand was? 53. He said my best glide was 63. And I realized I spent my whole high school career standing at the front of the circle because I would do that a whole bunch because I wanted to throw 60, so I thought I had to throw 55 from a stand because it was a small school. But it gave me the appreciation. Track and field gave me the appreciation for mechanics and all the things you can learn from sprinters, jumpers, and throwers. You know, and if you look
I
at
think a lot of the best training in the world that we have for anything comes from track and field.
Track and field and Olympic lifting, because it's an exact measurement. But anytime you measure, if you look at track and field, you can take from each one of those and apply it to any sport.
Sure.
And and track and field coaches are much more into mechanics. It's a different mindset. It's a different mindset.
All right, Al.
Well, I've rambled on enough.
That was awesome.
I hope they don't go to sleep after watching this. Put them on.
No, I really appreciate you coming on. Obviously, it's an honor for me.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Call you friend, and keep up the great work, and
Well, you've done a great job promoting it on your podcast, and then on Sirius Radio and all that. And I'm glad that people like you are continuing to do the things you're doing and promoting, and you've kept a balanced approach. You haven't gotten rid of the old. You'll accept what the new, but you also recognize that everything goes in trends. One point it was a flat swing. Now it's the upright, or now it's this. Everything goes in trends, and you got to be careful to know which one of those is beneficial and which one of those is just maybe not as beneficial.
Yeah, and what applies to whom, really, at the end of the day is what it comes down to.
You know what it is? In training, it's what, when, and who. Exactly. It's what you do, when you do it, and whom do you do it to, and how. Awesome. All right, thank you.
All right, Al, thanks. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Be good. Bye-bye.